The first thing I noticed was that he always requested the same corner room. Not that floor, not that general area, the exact same room number, across 4 years, under 5 completely different names. And when I pulled the accounting report and laid every booking side by side on my desk at 2 in the morning, the thing that hit me first wasn't the fake names. It wasn't the church card I'd find later. It wasn't even the cash. It was the note, attached to every single reservation, word for word, for 4 years. Guest requests no housekeeping for the duration of stay. I stared at it until the words stopped making sense, because I knew this man. I knew his handshake, the kind where he covered your hand with both of his and held it just a beat too long, like he was bestowing something. I knew the way he walked through our lobby like the space had been arranged for him. I knew that his congregation talked about him the way people talk about someone they're personally grateful God saw fit to put on this earth. And I knew that the young woman appearing across those bookings, listed sometimes as a guest, sometimes as a colleague, sometimes not listed at all, was a girl he had stood at a pulpit and named out loud in front of his entire congregation, daughter of the church, in front of hundreds of people, in front of the elders, in front of his wife, for years. That phrase had a function. I just didn't understand it yet. You need to understand who Pastor Gerald Mathis was before any of this makes sense. He ran the largest evangelical congregation in the county, thousands of members, a campus they'd expanded twice, a Sunday radio broadcast, a youth leadership program he'd built and put his name on. Other pastors quoted him. Local politicians wanted to be photographed with him. He once gave a keynote at a community fundraiser and got a standing ovation from people who had never set foot in his church. I've worked a hotel front desk for 6 years. I don't get impressed by confident men. But Gerald Mathis wasn't just confident. He had this quality where every sentence he said felt like it had already been approved by something above him. When he actually looked at you, said your name, you felt like you'd been noticed by someone who saw things other people missed. That was the instrument. I know that now. At the time, I just knew that he made the entire front desk stand up a little straighter without realizing they were doing it. He came in 6, 7 times a year, always had a reason ready before you could ask. Leadership conference, pastoral counseling certification, denominational summit. He never walked in without a story already prepared, never left a silence that might tempt you to fill it with a question. He had checked in under his own name exactly twice in 4 years. The first time I saw her, she was standing by the lobby windows while he checked in. Young, early 20s, maybe younger. It was hard to place exactly. Dressed carefully, the way women from certain church backgrounds learn to dress, like every choice had been considered twice. She was staring at her phone with the kind of focus that isn't actually about the phone. She wasn't looking at him. She wasn't looking at me. She was performing, not paying attention. He didn't introduce her. I didn't ask. He paid cash, took the key card, and walked to the elevator without a word to her. Not a glance. She followed about 4 steps behind him, eyes down, and just before the elevator doors closed, she reached up and adjusted the strap of her bag, this small, automatic gesture, and then stood very still, like she'd remembered something. Not beside him, behind him, 4 steps back, moving through that lobby like she already knew the exact amount of space she was supposed to take up. That was the thing that stuck with me. Not the cash, not the name, just that distance, the practiced quality of it. I mentioned it to my coworker Marcus. He laughed, said pastor types always had someone trailing behind them, assistant, intern, ministry staff. I let it go. About 6 months later, Marcus brought him up again. Different tone this time. He said the pastor had come in around 11 at night looking contained. That was the word he used, contained, like he was keeping something very still inside himself. He'd specifically asked Marcus not to link the booking to his loyalty account, said he didn't want promotional emails. Marcus told me this while stirring creamer into his coffee, completely unbothered. I thought about it the rest of that shift. This man preached regularly on financial stewardship. Danny, my coworker who attended his church, had once mentioned an entire sermon series he'd done on the theology of resources. And here he was, turning down loyalty points he'd more than earned, because he didn't want his name attached to a room. That is not a man protecting a surprise. That is a man who has thought through every connection between himself and a place and decided to sever them one by one. I started keeping notes. Nothing formal. I didn't even have language yet for what I was looking at. Just dates, names, anything that felt like it had been planned. The aliases got obvious once I knew to look. G. Morris, Gerald Whitfield, which I later found out was his maternal grandmother's surname. The kind of name personal enough to remember under pressure, untraceable unless you knew his family. One booking under a name I couldn't connect to him at all, except the room preference note was copied word for word. The payment methods rotated: cash, prepaid card, personal visa, cycling through just enough to avoid locking into any one pattern. Then, on the 5th booking I cross-referenced, I found the card. A number I recognized from prior ministry transactions, conference registrations, catering orders, the kind of institutional expenses that run through a church operating account. I checked it twice. 3 times. Someone's Sunday offering was paying for these rooms. I sat with that for a while. I had been to his church once, with Danny, just as a social thing. I thought about the women in the 4th row singing with their eyes closed, the younger women taking notes in little journals, the mothers sitting with their daughters. Around that same time, Danny mentioned the girl one morning like she was sharing good news. Said Pastor Mathis's spiritual daughter had just been accepted into a funded leadership program through the church, that he'd been mentoring her since she was 15 or 16, that he had this rare ability to recognize potential in young people that no one else had noticed. Then she said the phrase he used for her publicly, daughter of the church, said from the pulpit, said in front of the elders, said in front of his wife, said so often and so warmly that it stopped being strange. It just became who she was. He named her publicly so that he would never have to explain her privately. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. The accounting audit gave me the full picture. 19 bookings, 4 years, 5 aliases, 3 payment methods, 1 tied directly to the ministry operating account. Same floor every time, same corner room, same housekeeping refusal, same do not disturb for the full length of every stay. No exceptions, not once. 19 times, not 8, not 12, 19. I sorted them chronologically and looked at the first entry, did the math on her age. She would have been 18, possibly younger depending on the month. He had been her pastor since she was 15. I got up, went to the bathroom, ran cold water over my wrists, looked at myself in the mirror for a minute. Then I came back and kept going. Because stopping felt like the thing that had always protected him. For a while, I let myself call it an affair. That story had a shape I could hold. 2 people, a secret, a lie that eventually falls apart. An affair is a thing with edges. Then I found the paper logbook. We switched to a digital system 5 years ago. The old physical ledgers are kept in a storage cabinet in the back office that nobody opens unless they have a reason. I had a reason. I found an entry from 6 years back, before I worked there, before the digital system. A different alias, no visible connection to him at all unless you already knew the room number. The room number matched, and next to the entry, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone on our staff had written 4 words. Per church account, approved. I stood in that storage room and didn't move for a long time. Approved is not a word you write by accident. You write approved when you have looked at something, checked it against something else, and made a conscious decision to let it through. Somebody at my hotel had known, not suspected, known, and they had processed it and written it down and gone home. This started before I was here. Someone had been included in the arrangement, through instruction, through money, through fear I still don't know, and by the time I arrived, all that was left of them was 4 words in a locked cabinet. The affair story didn't survive that room. What replaced it felt older and much heavier. Before I tell you what happened with my manager, I want you to understand what I was walking in with. Printed records, A physical logbook entry, 5 aliases, 19 bookings, a ministry card, and a handwritten note placing the arrangement at least 6 years back. Organized chronologically. Nothing editorialized, just the evidence in the order it happened. She looked at it for maybe 90 seconds. Then she looked at me the way someone looks when they're deciding which version of the conversation to have. She said, very carefully, that a man of his standing, her word, standing, and an accusation built on hotel receipts could have serious consequences for the property. She used the word liability 3 times in 4 sentences. Then she mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that her sister's congregation had hosted him for a revival 2 summers ago. She didn't say it like it was relevant. She said it like she needed me to understand the full weight of the name I was holding. There was a long pause after that. She slid the papers back across the desk toward me. Didn't push them, just moved them back. Like that was a different kind of answer. I picked them up, thanked her, and left. I thought about the girl walking 4 steps behind him. 19 bookings. Per church account approved. I thought about every person in this chain who had looked at something that required a decision and made the same one. Then I thought about the journalist, a woman who covered religion and institutional accountability for a regional outlet. I'd read her work. She'd broken 2 previous church financial stories in neighboring counties and wrote about them like someone who understood that the money is never really about the money. I sent her everything anonymously, and I didn't take it back. 6 weeks of going to work, checking in guests, carrying all of it by myself. When the story ran, it ran clean. No speculation, no unnamed sources making vague accusations. Just a documented, sourced, chronological timeline. 19 bookings, 3 payment methods, a ministry account, and a paper ledger entry that predated the digital system. She had verified everything independently. She had found things I hadn't even sent her. The church's first statement called it a season of personal renewal. It lasted less than 48 hours before a lawyer clearly got involved, and it was replaced with language acknowledging inappropriate conduct and announcing an independent financial review. The review found that the ministry account had been used for hospitality expenses that could not be reconciled with documented ministry activities. 3 board members resigned within the month. No statements, no explanations, just 3 names gone from the website one morning. 3 board members, not one person blindsided. 3 people who saw the findings and decided that quietly disappearing was better than being asked follow-up questions. Then Carol Mathis gave her statement. She stood on the church steps in a cream blazer, hair back, no jewelry, perfectly put together. Not the outfit of someone who had spent the week falling apart, the outfit of someone who had been planning what to wear. She thanked the congregation for their prayers, asked for privacy, and said she had been unaware of the full extent of her husband's actions. Not unaware entirely, not blindsided by everything, unaware of the full extent. Full extent means there was a partial extent she already knew. It means her baseline was somewhere, and the full of what he built was above whatever that line was. I don't know what she knew. I don't know when she knew it. I don't know if she was protecting herself legally or if she was a woman who had quietly absorbed certain things for years and was only now learning how far it had gone. And I think that was exactly where she needed people to land. He resigned. She stayed. The church fractured, not in half, more like 60-40, with 60 on the side that found a way to explain it. Spiritual warfare, a moment of weakness. A man who had given so much being torn down by people who wanted to silence what God was doing through him. A moment of weakness. 19 bookings. They used his own language to defend him. Stewardship, accountability, spiritual covering, protection of the vulnerable. And then they turned those words around and pointed them at the exposure itself. The journalist had an agenda. The records were taken out of context. The real sin was what this was doing to the church's ministry. One elder stood up in a service and said that the people coming forward were the true threat to God's house, not the man who had been using God's house as a cover story for years, the people exposing it. Some of the loudest defenders were women. Women who had tithed, women who had brought their daughters to his youth program, women who had, at some point, probably sat in that fourth row with their eyes closed, believing every word of it. A woman in the comments of the local news article wrote that the girl should have known better than to put herself in that position. She had 2 daughters. She had liked every post the church ever made about the youth leadership program. The young woman released 3 sentences through an attorney: seeking healing, grateful for support, asking for privacy. No other words. She did not say victim. She did not say relationship. She did not give anyone a single phrase they could clip and use. Her attorney had built every sentence like a wall, and I understood why. Whatever had happened to her, however she understood it, however she'd lived inside it, the last thing she needed was her story becoming ammunition in a comment section argument about whether she should have known better. Danny never said his name again. Not once. 6 months of working side by side, and she never acknowledged the article, never responded when it came up near us. Just went quiet in a specific way and stayed there. I didn't push, but I thought about what that cost her. All those mornings she'd quoted him, all the certainty she'd organized around his words. She had helped make him believable without ever knowing that was what she was doing, and she'd carry that. And he wouldn't lose one night of sleep over it. The woman whose handwriting was in the logbook, I gave her name to the journalist. I don't know what came of it. I stopped asking. He named her from the pulpit. Gave her a title. Made their closeness public and sacred and celebrated, so that anyone who looked at it sideways was the one misreading something holy. He didn't just conduct this in secret. He built a public story first. Daughter of the church, mentorship, spiritual covering, a pastor with the rare gift to see what others couldn't. And then the congregation passed the language around like it belonged to them. They repeated it at dinners and in parking lots and in the church newsletter. They became part of the framework without ever being asked to. By the time anyone might have looked at something and wondered, they had already been given a reason not to. To wonder was to doubt. To doubt was to be faithless. And who wants to be faithless? That's the part I keep coming back to. He built the cover story in public, in front of witnesses, and then the witnesses protected it without knowing that was what they were doing. That is not a man who fell. That is a man who built a floor to fall onto. 4 months after the story ran, the journalist called me. A woman had contacted her, late 30s, different state, different city, different church. She had seen the coverage and recognized something, not his face. A pattern, the scheduling, the room habits, the distance between the public story and the private one. Something in the description had lived in her body for 15 years, and she finally had language to point at it. She had her own records, different hotel, different aliases, different city, same floor preference, same housekeeping note, same corner room, and she had heard the same phrase. At 17, from a pulpit in a state I'd never been to, daughter of the church. The journalist told me this quietly. She knew what she was handing me. Our hotel was not the beginning. Our city was not where this started. The logbook, the 4 words in blue ink, the staff member who made a choice before I ever got there, none of that was the first time any of it had been arranged. What I found was not a scandal I uncovered. It was one chapter in something much longer. There are other corner rooms, other doors with that same note on them, other women who heard that phrase when they were young enough to think it meant they were safe. And somewhere right now, there are people standing at the edge of what they know. The way my manager did, the way those board members did, the way someone did with a pen and a ledger long before I arrived, deciding that the cost of opening the door is more than they're willing to pay. Most of them will walk away. That's the part he counted on.